And Good Friday morning. It is, Friday, November 14th. As I stated, my name is Ryan Belmore, and I am the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. And Mr. Frank Prozich joins me. And good morning, Frank.
Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
Good. We've been doing these at all different times of the day, and 7:30 in the morning, 7:30 at night. It lost my time there for a minute, but it is Friday. We are
Still Friday, yeah.
Next Wednesday is the start of early voting.
That's right.
October 19th. And you can visit vote.ri.gov to find out where your early voting location is, to check your ballot, to make sure that you're registered to vote, to see your sample ballot, where you can see all the candidates that are running. There might be some new names on there or new races that you haven't even thought about. And important, not more importantly, but also important, is that backside of the ballot. We have a series of statewide questions. And then depending on where you live, Newport, you have 10 questions. Middletown has 6 questions. Each community has a bunch of different local issues. So a lot to dive into.
Yeah, big issues. Middletown and Newport, it's a school regionalization, and in Middletown also school construction. The outcome of that will have a great determination on the future of the communities.
That's it. We are on a statewide race today, which is why I have the honor of seeing you this morning. And we are going to the Attorney General race. And joining us is Attorney General Peter Neronha. And good morning, Peter.
Good morning, guys. Good to be with you today.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Good to have you with us.
Frank, I'm going to let you take this away.
All right. So, Peter, your opponent is Charles Calenda. I believe he's from Coventry, if I'm correct. But you do have a race. But one of the things that I've noted is I have not seen any kind of nastiness or negative campaigning out of that race. And did I miss something, or is it, or am I correct here?
Well, look, what I've tried to do, Frank, is just focus on the work of the office. I think if you are running 4 years after you took office, you don't have much to say about what you've done in those 4 years, then you probably shouldn't be running. I'm fortunate that the office in this administration has produced, I think, some strong work for the state of Rhode Island, and that's really where my focus has been.
I guess there are two particular issues that stand out, but I'm sure there are a lot more. One, of course, is the hospital merger issue that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and utility rates.
Yeah.
And so why don't we start with the utility rates? If you can kind of review that for us. And I know there are a lot of people upset about what looks like some substantial increases that we're about to see on, I believe, electric and gas rates. And how did all that happen?
Yeah, so frankly, it's an area that reflects some of the work that we've done in the office. And so we intervened before the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers last spring, actually a year ago, but the decision in Superior Court, last spring. And the reason for that is our electric bills are comprised of two components. One is the supply of energy, and one is the distribution of energy. And what's driven the rate increases most recently is the supply of energy. And it's really hard to fight for Rhode Islanders on that side for this reason. The utility company can't profit on that. So when they go out and buy it on the market, and they bought it last spring, they buy it on the futures market, that's a cost that is passed through to consumers. And so it's very hard for the Public Utilities Commission to do anything there. It's just a pass-through cost. It's as if the supermarket buys a piece of chicken and then sells it back to the buyer, the customer, at the same price. Where you have to fight, and where we did fight, was on the distribution side. And that was the first time in my recollection the office had ever done that. So what that looked like was this. We went to court, notwithstanding what the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers had done, and fought for Rhode Islanders in this way. We wanted to make sure that we took that opportunity, as National Grid was selling Narragansett Electric to Rhode Island Public Energy, that we got value for ratepayers, and we did. And so what we got back for Rhode Islanders were a number of things. One was $50 million in rebates to electric and gas customers. That's going to cut that increase this fall by at least a third. And so fighting there where we could really is going to make a big difference. And the governor sometimes touts that along with some other things that we're doing here. But I will tell you that was the work of this office that got that $50 million back for ratepayers. The other thing that we accomplished was there was about $150 million that the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers was going to allow the new energy company to charge Rhode Islanders for. About $100 million in in transition costs, and also $50 million to cover accounts that had not been paid. We really fought against that and prevented that from happening. So there won't be any rate increases on the distribution side for 3 years. There won't be those $150 million assessed to Rhode Island ratepayers, and we're getting $50 million back. It's going to cut that bill by a third. Is the bill too high? For sure. But had we not fought that fight, Frank, things would have been a lot worse. And so Rhode Islanders are at least going to see a benefit on their bills this fall, recognizing that bills are too high and we have to continue to fight for them. But the fight is not on the supply side. It's on the distribution side. It flew under the radar last year and last spring, but I'm really glad we intervened there on behalf of the people of the state.
So, and maybe this is kind of out of your purview, but is there a way to deal with the supply side? Is there perhaps, should we be looking at other resources for supply?
Well, I think that's one of the issues, right? So let's start with the baseline, right? Which is that the company can't charge us extra for that. Whatever they buy it for on the market, however they buy it, has to be approved by the state, the Public Utilities Commission. So they can't profit on that. So then the question becomes, how do we drive at that supply cost? Well, it's hard to do locally, obviously. There's really only one way to do it. Decrease our reliance on those fossil fuels, because that's where the price spikes are. Now, that's a transition that is going to take time. And the longer it takes us to transition to other kinds of energy resources, the harder it is to do that. We're going to continue to see these fluctuations on the market. The supply prices are driven by global conditions. And I believe it's also driven by profit taking by some of the fossil fuel companies that have made a ton of money over the last 6 months.
Unbelievable. What was it? Shell oil tripled their profits in the course of a year.
It's really unbelievable. And so that's an issue that I think has to be raised, at the federal level. I mean, it may be a question you probably have asked it of the federal candidates, both in the Congressional 1 and Congressional 2 races, because that's something that I think the Congress and the White House really have to take up, which is how do we push back against these fossil fuel companies that are profiting on a global supply? It's one thing if they were passing the cost along, but that's not what they're doing. On a national basis, they're taking profits, and that's adding to this problem for everyday Rhode Islanders.
Yeah, and certainly that's why the congressional races are just so important, because you do have very distinct positions relative to what to do about fossil fuels. And
look, I think we really have to, like for all candidates, like you're doing with me, and you should, with every candidate, we really have to drill down on things that on the substance, because that is something that can be addressed at the federal level and needs to be.
So I want to switch now to healthcare a little bit. And in my perception, our healthcare system is in deep trouble. We've had a revolving door for the director of the Department of Health. We have the CEOs of Lifespan of Care New England are stepping aside. We have only one independent hospital in Rhode Island, and we've got nursing shortages. We have claims that, in fact, we are reimbursing our doctors at less than neighboring states. And we still have Care New England kind of floating out there without a partner. You turned down that potential merger based on basically because of the lack of competition, if I put it simply.
Yeah, Frank, I think, our work in healthcare, I think, has been driven by an understanding that if we're not aggressive in this space, then Rhode Islanders are going to lose. I'll give you an example. Previously, before we took office, the St. Joseph's Hospital pension plan blew up because the office, frankly, was not doing deep dives into healthcare. We did that with Roger Williams and Fatima Hospitals, got $80 million in the bank from the then owner to keep those hospitals moving. That's how we have to function. When it comes to the merger, really two things that I was concerned about. We're one of the regulators that had to approve that. The other was the Department of Health. There were some things that really concerned me about that. What was proposed was to put 80% of our healthcare in one place. And sort of the default position, where the warning light comes on, among antitrust experts, the Federal Trade Commission, people who really think about healthcare and what makes it run well, is if you're going over 30% in one place, that knocks down competition, and that leads to less quality and less access and higher costs. And so that merger was way over 30%. It was at nearly 80%. And so after doing a deep dive into that, we were really concerned that would lead to a lot of problems for Rhode Islanders. And so that's why we rejected it. There were some other things too in there that I don't think should be lost. One is that neither of these entities were doing great financially. And so when you put two entities together that aren't doing well financially, you rarely in healthcare come up with one that is going to do great. So there was no plan on their part submitted to me that demonstrated how they could pay for all the things they were going to need to do to combine. So that was a problem. And there weren't a lot of details around the plan itself. And so what they were really asking me to do, in my judgment, was this: give you 80% of the market share, which is a lot of market share. It's going to drive costs up. It's going to eliminate competition, which makes them better. Fine. Tell me why that's a good thing. And they really could not do that. I asked them to tell me why I should take this risk on behalf of Rhode Islanders. Tell me what your plan is, and they couldn't do that. And so in the end, I decided that merger was not in the best interests of Rhode Islanders, and I denied it. And look, I think one of the things that we really saw when we did a deep dive into this, and we did do a deep dive because it's so important, one of the things that we saw was that competition really did make them better. So for example, when Kent County, with the assistance of what was then Partners, they have a collaboration agreement with now the Brigham, Mass General in Boston. As they improved their cardiology game, Rhode Island Hospital got better. That's just one of many examples where competition makes them better. Your broader point about healthcare, though, is a good one, which is we need a healthcare strategy in this state. We haven't had one for a very long time. It's really an opportunity for the next governor to really take that issue by the horns, along with the Department of Health and with our office, and really sit down and map out where we need to go in healthcare. Doing healthcare on a transaction by transaction basis is overall not in the best interest of the state. We were able to save Fatima and Roger Williams Hospital by the work that we did, get that $80 million in the bank that I control to keep them rolling. But the bottom line is that long term, there's a lot of healthcare issues that we have to take on, and we need to do it quickly.
It just, and again, it's probably outside your purview, but it seems that one of those areas where we ought to concentrate on are the neighborhood health centers, that some of them are doing a great job. Some of them are expanding. And there are probably some parts of the state that are lacking, but they seem to be taking some of the pressure off of some of the hospital networks and providing some pretty good patient care.
Yeah, Frank, and that's a good point. And here's another one. The reason Roger Williams and Fatima Hospital struggle is because they have a payer mix, meaning a payer mix coming from private insurers versus public insurers that is more heavily weighted towards public insurers than, say, some of the other hospitals. And so they don't do as well because their reimbursements are lower. We have to fix that public-private payer mix in such a way that these hospitals can be healthy going forward. But that requires strategic thinking, which hasn't happened yet. I hope to play a role there. The Department of Health should lead there. My hope is that they will frankly, exercise more leadership in that space. But I know that if my office isn't prepared to do healthcare comprehensively and well, Rhode Islanders are going to lose. I mean, if you remember that Department of Health did not weigh in on the merger. They should have. And we need a Department of Health that takes that regulatory role to its full extent and weighs in there. It shouldn't just be us. We have an important role there, but they never issued a decision. So that decision was ultimately left to us. It was the right one, no question in my mind, but the Department of Health has to be more engaged and more involved there.
Do you hear anything relative to Lifespan or Care New England, and what particularly Care New England, and whether they are in negotiations or in conversation with anybody about a potential merger? I was frankly very disappointed to see when the negotiations with Partners broke off, because Partners is just Partners now Brigham and Women's is a phenomenal network with facilities like Dana-Farber and Massachusetts Eye and Ear and Mass General, some of the really premier institutions that, contrary to what I think was being told, I thought, as with cardiology, that stuff flowed into Rhode Island as opposed to flowing out of Rhode Island. But that's personal.
Yeah, look, I think you raise a good point. I am not convinced that putting 80% of our healthcare in one place in Rhode Island is better than allowing people from outside the state to collaborate with people inside the state to build a better healthcare system. I mean, obviously, we would take a close look at that to make sure that the decision-making about Rhode Island healthcare remained in Rhode Island and that our healthcare system here remains strong. But I don't rule that out, and that's something we can solve for. There was a lot of talk in the context of the merger, Frank, that, if we didn't accept this merger, it was basically an all or nothing proposal, in front of us. If you don't accept it, we'll lose local control. What I was really concerned about was that we wouldn't have local control because this behemoth in healthcare would have control over us. I think that competition in the marketplace drives better results in terms of quality, access, and affordability. Look, if you have the whole system, you have no incentive to deliver healthcare where it's needed. Those neighborhood health centers that you're talking about, you have no incentive to do it because you control the whole pie. So you really have to be careful about that. And truthfully, you know, there were some folks who said, well, we can do this with certain guardrails. And I encouraged those people to show me what those guardrails were. And I never got them from anybody. And the reason is because you can't set up guardrails that are going to solve for 80% market share. That's why the sort of the default threshold is 30%, not 40%, not 50%, it's 30%. You put 80% of anything in somebody's hands, that's a monopoly. And that's a really hard thing to overcome if you're looking at it through the eyes of everyday Rhode Islanders.
You know, one last thing on healthcare. One of the things that Lifespan did do is they call it merge, but in my mind acquired Coastal Medical, which is our largest primary care practice in Rhode Island and pretty substantial. And I guess that falls maybe into a different category, but clearly that was pretty significant.
Yeah, sure. It's like anything. In full disclosure, my wife was a partner at Coastal, so I recused myself from the office analysis of whether or not that presented antitrust problems. But let me say this, whether my wife was there or not, one of the things that you have to be concerned about too is consolidation of internal medicine doctors, primary care doctors. My wife is a primary care doctor. Again, it's the same thing. If there isn't competition in that marketplace, Rhode Islanders lose as well. So, we took a very close look at that. Again, I wasn't involved in it because obviously my wife was employed there and is now a Lifespan employee. But, it's really the goal of the office to make sure that we have the kind of information available to us and then do the kind of deep analysis that can really render a decision that makes sense. I've heard people say, well, take the lead from the Department of Health. Well, in the context of the merger, that would be impossible because the Department of Health wasn't acting in that space and never issued a decision. We had to step up there. My hope in the future is that they'll be a more engaged partner. And look, I understand they were dealing with COVID, but the reality is we had to step up there. And I'm glad that we did. We were able to do it. And look, our decision, regardless of whether some agree with it or not, we certainly were able to spell out in detail why we reached the conclusions we did. And then again, I remain convinced that it was the right one.
Aside from healthcare, aside from energy, which are appear to be the two marquee issues, what else has been some of the things that you feel that your office has had some great accomplishments over the last few years?
Yeah, well, look, sticking on the civil side, we can talk about the criminal division because they're doing some great work too, keeping people safe. But my goal, Frank, has been to get the office out on offense for the people of the state, to get us out there in an active way, not let the work come to us, but get out there and do stuff. Because when we're on offense, we're making Rhode Islanders' lives better. What do I mean? So, for example, this morning, the Rhode Island Supreme Court issued a decision in our favor, supporting our intervention in the Champlin's Marina expansion out on Block Island, which the people on Block Island opposed, and the CRMC worked out with a mediator a result which would have allowed for that expansion, in our view, in contravention of the law. We got involved in that case. We won that case in the Supreme Court. The people of Block Island are better off for it. We got involved, obviously, in the opioid manufacturers and distributors and brought back nearly a quarter billion dollars in money and medicine for Rhode Islanders. Held out against the Sacklers in Purdue, put another $40 million into the till for Rhode Island, another $1 billion across the country. 9 AGs stood up in that context. We've been involved in consumer protection. We've gone to court against car dealers that are adding fees when Rhode Islanders go down and buy a vehicle. One thing I really want to talk about that's gotten some coverage, but perhaps not enough, is our work on behalf of lead-poisoned children. There are 500 children in Rhode Island that are lead poisoned every year. The Department of Health has issued notices of violation to their landlords to clean up the lead paint in their apartments. Those landlords have blown the Department of Health off. And so we have gone to court 17 times and threatened to go to court and many, many others. And as a result, over the last year, 43 apartments have been remediated for lead paint, and those kids are now living in a safe environment. All of that work that I just mentioned was not being done before. We weren't intervening in environmental cases. We weren't going to court to help lead-poisoned children. We weren't aggressively going after opioid companies. And so that work is making Rhode Islanders' lives better. And I'm really proud of the work that our civil division has done. And so I'm grateful for their great work. And on the criminal side, we've really sort of changed our approach from a one size fits all, everything comes to us and then we do it kind of approach. I don't believe that you can solve our violence problem by simply waiting for somebody to shoot somebody and then charge them with shooting them, or worse, charging and hopefully prosecuting them effectively for murder. By that point, we've already lost because someone's been shot or killed. So we put together a task force under my authority with detectives from Providence, Pawtucket, and Central Falls that work with ATF agents, my own investigators, who are excellent, and the Department of Corrections to target people who are committing violent acts on the street. We've had some great success there. Just recently, we were able to apprehend a guy who was putting together ghost guns. He was down in West Warwick. We were able to use our statewide authority to go after him, got him off the street. He had many ghost gun kits that he was assembling and putting out on the street. He had automatic weapons. He had silencers. That's the kind of work that this team is doing to go after people who would help commit violent acts or help those who want to commit violent acts before they can do it. So the office, whether it's criminal or civil, has been active and out on offense for Rhode Islanders, and it's yielding, I think, strong results.
Rhode Island's gun control laws have us amongst one of the safest states in which to live, basically in terms of gun violence. Do we need to do more?
Yeah, look, I think we have come a long way over the last 5 years, Frank. If you go back and look at where we were 5-6 years ago, we didn't have red flag laws, which take guns out of the hands of people who are threats to themselves or others after a court hearing. There are some people who still think those red flag laws are the wrong thing to do. To me, they're exactly the right thing to do. Get guns out of the hands of people who would use them to harm themselves or others. The work that we did to get the ghost gun prohibition passed. That's a gun without a serial number. You can go online and buy a ghost gun kit. No serial number. You don't have to pass a background check. 52 cases we've charged since that law was passed 2 years ago. We've gone into homes. Providence police have gone into homes and found people putting together ghost guns. Again, guns without serial numbers, guns that you don't have to pass a background check to get. So it should come as no surprise that criminals are using those guns. Those laws are making us safer because we're getting those guns off the street. School safety. I raised 2 children here in the Jamestown public schools. I didn't want guns in those schools. Those kids were safer when there were no guns in schools. The high capacity magazines. There's a lot of talk about that. But when the Providence Police Department went into a home in Carolina Street about 1.5 years ago, where 9 people had been shot outside that place, they found a 60-round magazine, a 50-round magazine, a 30-round magazine, a 40-round magazine. Those magazines present danger to the public. I can give you case after case where our gun laws are being used to take bad guys off the streets. I'll give you another one. A guy goes into a convenience store in Providence with a high capacity magazine and a ghost gun, meaning a gun with no serial number. He didn't have to pass a background check to get. He fires 2 rounds into the floor, 1 into the ceiling to scare the clerk who turns over the money. As he's leaving with a getaway driver, he's using a 27-round magazine to fire back at a police officer. That's dangerous to the public and the police. There's another case we had, an AR-15 style weapon, ghost gun. A guy hits his girlfriend in the head with it, comes out of the house as a police officer is responding to the domestic violence call. This guy with the AR-15 ghost gun is shooting at the police officer as he's coming down the street in his cruiser. Yeah, we've come a long way. We're safer as a result. But these laws are really important, and the fight ahead is to defend them in court. There's no question we're going to be defending the high-capacity magazine in court in Rhode Island over the next several months. I believe that these laws make Rhode Islanders safer and police safer, and so that's why I support them. It's why we defend them, and so we've come a long way, and I'm glad that we have.
Reproductive rights, of course, is one of the big issues on the table, somewhat locally, but certainly nationally. In what jeopardy is Rhode Island if, in fact, Congress goes Republican and there is a nationwide ban that's approved by Congress?
Yeah, that would effectively, because of the supremacy clause, eliminate Rhode Island's Roe v. Wade protections that we passed in the Reproductive Privacy Act a number of years ago. And look, this comes up a lot. This fight, which is not over even here in Rhode Island. So, for example, that Reproductive Privacy Act that the General Assembly passed 2 years ago, which codified Roe v. Wade in Rhode Island and protected a woman's right to choose pre-viability, was challenged in the Rhode Island Supreme Court. We won that case on behalf of Rhode Islanders, and then they tried to take it to the Supreme Court. They just lost that this week. So that fight continues. I think sometimes out of the eyes of some Rhode Islanders. But let's move to the question that you've asked, which is if there were to be a national abortion ban, that would apply here in Rhode Island, notwithstanding what we've done here to protect a woman's right to choose. So, that is a significant national issue for Rhode Islanders. And again, when people are running, for Congress, that is a question that all Rhode Islanders should be asking themselves. Where are they in that fight? Are you on the sidelines, are you on the fence, or are you in the game? It's an appropriate question to ask them, because I think Rhode Islanders have the right to know where they stand.
I think a huge question. Also, I think in other general officer races as well, we need to know where people stand on the issue. As you look forward to the next 4 years, what do you see as the major issues that the office expects to face, and maybe some of either policy changes or things that may have very long-lasting impact on the state?
Well, look, I think some of the things we've already talked about, healthcare, you identified it. That's going to be an ongoing challenge. The good news is we built a really strong team. Frankly, the office, Frank, is very strong now. We've been able to recruit some great talent, and we're seeing the results. One of the cases that I already mentioned, the case involving Champlins, a new employee that I hired a few years ago, argued that case in the Supreme Court. Her name is Sarah Rice. She's excellent. She's one of many strong attorneys that we've hired. Our healthcare unit is very strong now, but healthcare is coming. We know we have to do more work there. We're going to be doing more consumer protection work. We went to the General Assembly to get our consumer law changed so that we could do more. 2 years ago, we couldn't go after car dealers that were overcharging Rhode Islanders. We couldn't do that work. We couldn't do that work because the law didn't allow us to do it. We got that law changed. So sometimes people ask me, why go to the General Assembly? When I go up there, is to get a tool that I can use on their behalf. So I foresee us doing more work in environmental protection, doing more work to protect Rhode Island consumers, to do more work in healthcare, to do more work in public utilities to make Rhode Islanders' lives better. And on the criminal side, our task force is doing great work going after violent criminals before they shoot somebody. And that work needs to continue. We just recently purchased a ballistics testing machine, the second one for the state, with asset forfeiture money we recovered from drug dealers. So it didn't cost the taxpayers a dime, but we're able to turn around ballistics evidence overnight as opposed to in 6 months. We're solving cases faster using that technology. So putting all that stuff on the table will allow us to move forward in a way that will be really effective for Rhode Islanders and deliver real results. I'm really proud of the last 4 years. We've come a long way. We've got a ways to go still. And I'm really looking forward, hopefully with the voter support, to be able to do that continuing in the next year.
On the ballot, question in many communities is about the sale of cannabis, retail sale of cannabis. The legislature, of course, has passed it, but now it has to be approved by each of these individual towns. What do you think the impact, if that passes across the board, what do you think the impact of that will be on Rhode Island?
Yeah, the place what I'm really concerned about, when it comes to marijuana, about two things. Of all the threats that we deal with, when I was U.S. attorney, I looked at issues similarly. I look at what are the threats to Rhode Islanders. Am I concerned about somebody who wants to use marijuana in their home? I'm not. An adult I'm talking about, but I do worry about its impact on children for certain. I do understand that it's a quality of life issue for many communities who don't want people smoking marijuana outside the hardware store or in the public park. But where I'm really concerned, particularly from a law enforcement perspective, is our ability to take people who are under the influence of marijuana, or frankly any drug, off our highways. I have seen over the first 4 years, and I will tell you, I've been a career prosecutor, state and federal, going back to 1996. I've spoken to far too many families that have lost a loved one or had a loved one seriously injured because of impaired driving. We're able to get people off the road using a breathalyzer test in the case of alcohol. For drug recognition, it's much harder. We don't have as many experts, and the testimony is less accepted by judges. And so I really worry about that. Perhaps that will improve as technology advances over the years, but that's what I'm really concerned about, Frank.
Peter, we're pretty close to the end of time now. Just anything else that you wanted to add?
No, look, I'm just really pleased to be with you. And as I've said, if after 4 years you don't have stuff to talk about, then you probably shouldn't be running for re-election. I've been fortunate that the office has done a lot. I enjoy talking about the work of the office. I could talk to you guys for another half hour if you had the time. But I'm really grateful for your willingness to have me on. And
Well, we're trying to make sure that Ryan makes his plane.
It's all right. Peter, I actually have a question, and it's a little personal in a sense, but from my point of view, and maybe some others, your day-to-day is focused on some of the darkest days in people's lives. You often are seeing that, reading about that, heartbreaking, sad news. Where do you find the positivity? How do you ground yourself and not let it get to you?
And I've been doing it for a long time, Ryan, and I said at the body worn camera program, we didn't talk about, but we're now putting body cameras on every police officer in the state, with the exception of a handful. I don't have many opportunities to get out there and deliver good news. I mean, it's usually bad news. My mother tells me I don't smile enough on TV. It's because the news isn't always good. In fact, it's usually controversial at a minimum or worse. For me, my family has always grounded me. My wife is a healthcare worker. My kids I raised here in Jamestown, as I mentioned. And, so through family, I find sort of, the balance in my life, the foundation. We're close. The four of us are very close. We talk a lot, even though my sons are now, one's living in Texas and one is in medical school in St. Louis, but we're close. And that's where I find my gravity when I need it.
Excellent. Thanks for answering that. I often wonder that with police officers, doctors, there's got to be something. And I think it often comes back to family. And it's
true.
A reminder of all of us that not everything is negative. Pay attention to the Attorney General's office for some positive news that he's doing for you. And we'll all be okay.
Yeah. And look, I think Rhode Island's such a beautiful physical place. That's the other thing, whether you're, there are beautiful places in Providence, there are beautiful places down in the Newport area. Yes, as I mentioned, I live in Jamestown, and sometimes just a walk, Beaver Tail or Satchwest Point, or getting out to a beach, can kind of bring you back to what's real and have a calming effect on you.
All right. Well, maybe we'll see you at the Bones Wharf Seafood Festival this weekend.
That sounds good. It's not too far away.
There you go. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Be safe.
All right. And that is Attorney General Peter Neronha. And we appreciate him taking the time out of his busy Friday to join us.
Yeah.
And
Ryan, I just want to add for anybody who's aware, we lost the owner of one of our radio stations last night, Chris DiPaolo. I do some stuff down at WBLQ in Wesley. Chris, not 50 years old, passed away in his sleep last night. He brought an incredible energy to the position, a great deal of passion for radio and for the community, and those are the kinds of people that we need who are in this business of providing the news and outlets for people in the community. And for anybody who knows Chris, I just wanted to pass that along so people can maybe extend their condolences to his family and to the station as well.
Absolutely. And there's a lot being said on social media this morning. And obviously, Chris was an ally of What's Up Noops. He was a supporter. He was a friend. He helped us promote What's Up Noop and what we're doing over in Southern Rhode Island. And we will certainly miss him. And we're here to support WBLQ in any way possible, as well as his other radio stations moving forward.
Yep, indeed. And when I would be on the, I'd often wear my What's Up Noop hat when I'd be down at the radio station, and he was a great supporter of What's Up Noop.
Yes, so he'll be missed. That's going to do it for this interview. If anybody wants to go back and watch this interview with Peter Neronha, it will be available on whatsupnoop.com. Our full interview schedule is also available on there. Frank Prosnitz, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, so that's going to do it for this interview. Visit whatsupnoop.com. You can watch, listen, these interviews, and more.